There was once a young man named David. He lived in a small community where everyone knew his name. At only 27 years old, David was the richest person in the entire town. People admired him. Children waved at him when he drove past in his expensive black SUV. Shop owners stood up when he entered their stores. Even the elders spoke of him with respect. David owned several businesses, farmland, delivery trucks, and a large mansion on the hill that overlooked the community. His story seemed perfect. Every weekend, music filled his compound. Friends surrounded him. Money flowed so easily that he began to believe it would never end. He often said, "Poverty can never find my address." That sentence made people laugh. But life was quietly listening. One afternoon, David received an offer from a group of investors from the city. They promised him unbelievable profits if he invested most of his wealth into a massive real estate project. The numbers looked too good to ignore. His accountant warned him. "David, don't put everything into one investment. Diversify." But David was confident. He believed successful people took big risks. So he sold some of his businesses, withdrew his savings, borrowed additional money from the bank, and invested nearly everything he owned. For a few months, it appeared to be the best decision of his life. Construction began. Photos were posted online. People praised his vision. David walked through the community with even greater pride. Then, everything changed. The investors disappeared. The company's offices were suddenly closed. Phones stopped working. Emails went unanswered. Within days, David realized he had been trapped in a carefully designed fraud. He rushed to the city, but the buildings were empty. The signs had been removed. The people he trusted were gone. And the money was gone with them. At first, he thought he could recover. He tried to save his remaining businesses. But creditors began calling. Banks demanded repayment. Suppliers wanted their money. One by one, his properties were seized. The delivery trucks were auctioned. The farmland was sold. Finally, the mansion on the hill was taken by the bank. The same neighbors who once admired him now whispered when he passed by. Some mocked him. Others avoided him completely. The parties disappeared. The friends disappeared. The respect disappeared. David moved into a small rented room at the edge of the community. The man who once employed dozens of workers could barely afford a meal. There were days he drank only water and slept to forget his hunger. One evening, he walked through the marketplace wearing old clothes. A little boy looked at him and asked his mother, "Isn't that the rich man who used to live on the hill?" The mother pulled the child away without answering. David stood there in silence. That moment broke him more than losing the mansion. He realized that many people had loved his wealth, not his heart. Weeks turned into months. David became known as the poorest young man in the community. People who once greeted him first now looked away. But something unexpected happened. An old carpenter named Mr. Samuel noticed David sitting alone outside a closed shop. The old man sat beside him and said, "Son, when money leaves, it reveals who you really are." David had no strength left to pretend. He admitted his mistakes. His pride. His reckless decisions. His refusal to listen to wise counsel. Mr. Samuel offered him a small job helping in his workshop. The pay was tiny. But David accepted. For the first time in years, he worked with his own hands. He swept the floor. Carried wood. Learned to build furniture. Slowly, people began to see a different David. Not the arrogant millionaire. Not the broken victim. But a humble man willing to start again. Years later, David was no longer the richest person in the community. He never regained the mansion or the luxury cars. Yet he became something more valuable. He became respected for his character. When young people asked him about success, he would smile and say, "I lost my money because I thought wealth made me untouchable." Then he would pause and add, "The day I became the poorest man in the community was the day I finally understood the true value of wisdom, humility, and hard work." And the people listening would fall silent. Because they knew they were hearing the words of a man who had experienced both the highest peak of wealth, and the deepest valley of poverty.